This is the Writers Are People Too podcast, where I just can't get writers to shut up. Tonight, we have with us author DT Bryant. So, your book, before we get into that, actually, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I live in Nashville. I'm a pastor priest at a church called St. Mary of Bethany Parish. We sort of like Anglican Episcopal adjacent. We're part of something called the Anglican Free Communion, which is in the family. Grew up in Southern California, moved to Nashville when I was a freshman in high school with a religious cult, which is a big part of the book. I've been a coach and a teacher and a pastor and all those things. And I've got a wife, Rebecca, and four kids, three boys and a girl, and a new puppy that we just got last week that we love and are wondering why we got a puppy all at the same time.
Nice. Yeah, you're in for a wild ride, it sounds like.
Oh man, yeah, a lot of chaos.
Yeah. So we'll get into the cult stuff a little bit later because I also grew up in a cult
No
light,
kidding.
as I like to
Yeah,
call it. No Kool-Aid, but it was a
yeah,
little culty.
I
But
understand. Yeah.
yeah. So your book,
Mhm.
Unless a Seed Falls to the Ground, Welcoming the Death of the Whiteness Gospel. So it came out January 14th of this year. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is the Whiteness Gospel?
Yeah, a lot of ways to look at it. I think whiteness is, I think, most easily defined as an obsession with ownership, whether that's ownership of property, which certainly in this country, it's a big part of it. Also, the ownership of ideas, the possession of truth. Willie James Jennings, who's a theologian that was very instrumental in the book coming together for me, defines whiteness as possession, control, and mastery. Um, uh, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about it's owning the earth forever and ever. Amen. So there's this ownership component to it. There's also this superiority aspect to it, that it's this insatiable need to be superior. James Baldwin writes about the need for whites to be superior and how that divides, really shaped the United States, because each immigrant group that would come would begin this pursuit of becoming white. And so Italians, Irish immigrants, all these different groups come here, try to become white in order to be better than someone else. So this combination of ownership and superiority merges for different sects of Christianity, which you and I, it sounds like we can both speak to, this desire to own a truth that nobody else has that makes us superior to somebody else. I think it's also really rooted in soul as being an individual possession, and the individualized possessed soul becomes the thing that either goes to heaven or goes to hell, and it just absolutely obliterates any hope for communion, for community, as it divides. So the metaphor in the book is cancer. I call it tulip cancer, which is a fun way to repurpose Calvinism to make a point, but it's this metastasizing lie that recruits to the lie that it's not part of the body, it is the body. How's that for the whiteness gospel?
So that was a lot to
That was a
digest.
lot. Sorry about that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're fine. I mean, you wrote a whole book about it, so I'm sure you got
Yeah.
a lot to say. So you described this religion as cancer-like. So you said, can you rephrase again what you just said? What makes it cancer-like?
Yeah. A friend of mine, Jay Lynn, is a musician, and he's also a medical school student at Columbia. And so he has this incredible ability to understand science and the human body, but also put things metaphorically. And we were talking one time, and he said cancer in its most basic form is a lie that says, I'm not part of the body. I am the body. And it's all about unregulated cell growth. And it recruits to that lie. And it says, come be part of this self-sustaining eternal body that's actually dying and spreading death within the organism that it's growing in. So when I heard that, it was just a straight line to, oh, that's what I think the United States itself, we're seeing that right now. And like, we can't even be friends with Mexico and Canada because we are going to win, and we are self-sustaining. It's a cancerous lie that refuses to be part of North America, that refuses to be part of the world. But in Christianity and in religion, it creates these different groups that say they're not part of the body, they are the body. And I think Christianity has a dangerous component to it at its very core, which I think is worth wrestling with as a Christian. But is that Christianity that says I'm not part of the body, I am the body? I don't think that's what Jesus came to do. I think he actually came to reconcile the whole body of humanity. But yeah, so that's the cancer metaphor and what I think this kind of religion does in the world.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to put to outline for myself in my mind what the point you're trying to get at is. So do you think that there is then a more correct version of Christianity that people should be following?
That's what I'm trying to argue. Like the whole thing needs hospice. So welcoming the death is I present this cancer and say that I've got it. Chapter 1 is called It's Incurable and I've Got It. And I look at my life and all the groups I've been part of, whether the cult that I grew up in or I was in the Presbyterian Church in America, the Anglican Church in North America, went to Church of Christ High School and college, and all of these groups think that they can split from something that's been corrupted, recover an original purity and start over, and as long as they're in charge, everything will be okay. And it just, again, it keeps metastasizing, it keeps replicating that lie. And so I think the irony is we're asking to stop seeking some pure Christianity and seek belonging. I think St. Mary's, we talk about, let's not try to do it right, let's try to do it together and really look for communion that transcends our different opinions, and find one another. I think another thing about whiteness is it's very all or nothing, and it sees truth as some insular formula that is replicated. And so to see other Christians, right, left, conservative, progressive, as part of the whole, and to quit trying to be the whole and contain the whole in self or in a group is the way forward. So it's not like the pure doctrine. I believe deeply in like good theology. I think good theology is kind. I don't think it's salvific, if that makes sense. And I think we're supposed to be talking about the writing process. And I hope I'm not going on too much of a
No,
tangent
I
here.
mean it's about your book too.
Yeah, but yeah. So it's getting away from that addiction to a pureness that brings people together and says, let's figure out how to not leave anybody out. And I do think that's ultimately what Jesus wants to do, is to stop scapegoating in the world. And so to heal from our need to cut someone off in order to consider ourselves loved or special would be the approach. And again, it's the hospice metaphor. I chose it on purpose because I didn't want it to start over again with some pure idea that launches the same lie. But I think this way of doing things needs to die, if that makes sense. I think it's the most nonviolent approach we can take, so that something else can be born, but something else where we're not in charge. Instead of saying it'll be safe because we're in charge, there's sort of like, actually, it'll be safe because we're not. And we've got to let this way of doing things go.
So you keep mentioning whiteness, but what I keep hearing you say after that is a list of behaviors. I mean, whiteness is just a skin color. And then like you keep saying behaviors, and then you said something after that, like we need to change. So what are the things that need to change?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I don't think of whiteness as a skin color. I think it is the assimilation into the self-sufficient, the assimilation into standing alone. So anyone can participate in that way of being. That's a really helpful distinction. So whiteness, not the color of skin. That's the color of skin has been the marker of how it spreads. And the easiest, Jennings, again, he has a book called After Whiteness. And he says that the project is to assimilate into the self-sufficient white male. For me to walk into the room, like I start with an advantage in that space. Other people might assimilate into that in order to be in charge. But to separate ourselves from that need to be self-sufficient, that need to rise in that assimilation project. That's the core of whiteness. That's what Baldwin is saying, that it changes based on people's assimilation or assimilating practices. So I think of it more as behaviors than the color of our skin, if that is helpful.
So I mean, yes, but what would you say are some of the toxic specific behaviors that you've seen in the church that have brought you to write this book?
Yeah, so I mean, greed is very high on the list. To begin with ownership, there's a in the in the book where I repurposed tulip, and I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Calvinism, but the Puritan element of the United States that came at the beginning, they were Calvinist people from Britain, and I won't go into that. But my tulip cancer, it's total mediocrity, unlimited surveillance, lucrative atonement, irredeemable masculinity, and perseverance of the lie. So I think those are beliefs that are or behaviors that are part of it. There's this a mediocrity at the top that is um, deputized to bring unlimited surveillance into the lives of people. So the police state, the police, again, James Baldwin writes about the sheriff pastors in the United States that are there to police the people in the church, not to serve them, but to surveil them, and then all for a lucrative atonement. It's insanely wealthy. There's a story in that chapter, Lucrative Atonement, about a church where I worked where this is a friend of mine who told me the story. His wife decided, I want to give $1,000 a month to the church. And he's like, fine. And she goes, I want to do it all at once with just $12,000 check. He goes, okay. So that Sunday they put a $12,000 check in the offering. They get a call from the finance guy at the church that week asking my friend to go to lunch. They go to lunch, and the guy tells them he's a financial planner and he can help teach my friend how to hide their money in the Cayman Islands. And this is because they gave $12,000 one week. And like, I know the people, I know their kids went to private school. I know how they feel about public education. So they're hiding money in the Caymans while sending their kids to a school, while saying they have to because public schools aren't good enough, while they're, I think, stealing from kids in public school that money that would be making things more just. So that's one example of a behavior, and that's got a lot of things in there. I think a lot of pastors are paid to be cops instead of to serve people and to unite people. So that's a big part of it. And I think it rewards mediocrity. It keeps people out, and it won't let like true um, innovation or true genius be in the room because it's so committed to keeping different things out that they would say would pollute it, but it's actually it's a veneer of purity that doesn't really exist. That's one example.
So what kinds of things do you think should be brought into the church then? And let's make it a two-part
Yeah.
question then. And what things do you think it's done a good job of keeping out that should be kept out?
Um, Nothing comes to mind that it's done a good job of. I would hope it would keep out abusers. I would hope that it would keep
Mm-hmm.
out,
Yeah.
greed. I would hope that it would keep out division, but those things have been the fuel um, for the machine. And so I think the posture of keeping out um, those, those passages of scripture, it's this movement that's just exploding in the world, and the empire wants to shut it down. Like that's not our story in the United States. It's been the empire from the beginning, the marriage of Christianity in the United States. So I think to look at those passages that are like defend the gospel and those kinds of things, I don't think it's talking about Christianity in the United States. It's such a different thing. So
Yeah.
I think what we need to keep out is superiority. What we need to keep out is the idea of keeping out, in a sense. And then I think of contemplatives like Thomas Merton, Richard Rohr, that would say what we want in is your true self. So to invite people to be all of who they are in communion, ironically, again, that's what completes us, the togetherness, not our individuality. And you have something I don't have. I have something you don't have. And that joy of relationship is the point of it all. So keep out the division, keep out the cancer, in a sense, to find each other again. Um, in this beautiful, gift of being alive in
Mm-hmm.
creation.
So who is this book for? Is this written for people who are currently in the church that you want to get a good message that, hey, things need to change, or is this a news bulletin to the secular world? Hey, things are screwed up. This is not what Christianity is. Like, what's your goal behind this?
I think the people I had in mind the most as I wrote it were people that the systems have hurt the most. Again, like I'm a 47-year-old straight white guy with 4 kids, like, and a puppy. Like there's a lot of things about me. I was a basketball coach. Like there are a lot of things I can walk in a room and have in my, whatever bio that give me a voice. In the book, I was sexually abused by multiple people before I was 13 years old. There's the trauma of, my family of origin and the different things I've gone through. And there have been these sufferings and these abuses in my life that make me able to, I don't know what it's like to be Black in America. I don't know what it's like to be a woman in the church in America, but I've like experienced a kind of systemic oppression that I think someone like me in this body, in this world, needs to give voice to for the people who don't walk into a room and have a voice. So really thinking about them, some of my favorite experiences so far in hearing people's reactions to it has been those people who have been outcast, who have been told they're not part of this, who have read it. My mom got a text from a friend who read it, and she said, I'm starting to hope maybe I've been close to Jesus the whole time. So for the people who have been told they're not part, scripturally, maybe Jesus would say it's for the lost sheep of Israel. Like who has been scattered, who has been told they're not part. And then it's an appeal to the leadership of this thing, whether it's bishops or pastors or elders or whoever they are. I would say, like, stop planting churches today. Like, if you've got a church plant in the works, shut it down. No more expansion. One of the things I argue for in the book is ecclesial reparations, and all of this outlandish wealth that's been built on the backs of people, redistribute it. That's what they did in the first century, right? Let's
Mm-hmm.
redistribute the wealth. Let's spread it. Let's do justice and love mercy and walk humbly. And in that space, I would love for the church planting networks to shut down if they read it and see themselves in it and say, you know what, this is nonsense. Let's stop. So that's sort of, I guess, the two groups. I think people, if they wanted to understand the mind of the sectarian way of American Christianity, I think it would be a helpful book. I think it's a funny book. It's a sad book. It's like got a lot of humanity in it. So I think it would help anyone who wanted to understand it. I think it could be entertaining and insightful to anybody. But those two groups, shut it down and hope for the people who have been wounded by it. Probably my
Mm-hmm. So the first part of the title, unless a seed falls to the ground, where'd you get that from, and what does that mean?
Jesus says that. So that is right before he is going to be crucified. His friends, Andrew and Philip, get excited because the Greeks are paying attention to his message. And it's this moment where I think his disciples see fame coming and celebrity and like, hey, the philosophers think we have a good philosophy. I bet it's about to blow up and become big. And Jesus' response to that is, it's time to die. Unless a seed goes into the ground and dies, it doesn't bear fruit. So this hospice metaphor, I think, is very much related to the life of Jesus, the hope of Jesus. I think even Jesus, what he's doing in his life is a kind of hospice for the merger of empire and God, in the first century. And he sees the destruction coming, and he's saying, what's a nonviolent way to get through this together? So I think for those of us who have been in power, to lay down our lives as seeds so that something else can grow is a Jesus way of doing it. So that's where that title came from. Originally, it was going to be called No Lie Can Live Forever, which is a Dr. King quote.
A little
A
more aggressive.
little more aggressive. Yeah. And so, we changed it in that space.
Okay. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, you casually threw out that you grew up in a cult, and so did
Yeah.
I. And I have friends that grew up alongside me, and I think I've seen wildly different life paths emerge from the people that grew up alongside me. Some people are way over the top religious, and some people have renounced Christianity and theism all together. So I'm a bit more middle of the road, I'd say, and it sounds like you perhaps are too. But how did that affect you growing up, and kind of how did it get to where you're at today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, an obsession. I don't remember not being consumed with the idea of God. And I would say even God's love. I mean, there was always this tenderness in my own heart, this tenderness at the idea, this belief that there is a love that transcends all of this. The cult, we were told that we had to be morally perfect to be saved. And that got in deeply as well. And so I began this uh, perfection pursuit that made me very odd. And, the remnants are still here of all of that. There was a book I read from the Scholastic Book Fair called How to Become a Perfect Person in 3 Days. And I was an elementary school kid and I was like, this is going to be it. I'm going to crack the code because of this. And so a perfectionism, not so much in like, I was never really an achiever and all that stuff. Like in school, I was elementary school, but this like perfectionistic drive to be morally perfect in a sense. And there was this very rigorous ability, or not ability, but attempt at holiness that just like broke me again and again. And in that being broken again and again, found a mercy that transcends. That never, I don't know if you, East of Eden, John Steinbeck. I mean, you're from Santa Barbara, surely there's been some Steinbeck
Yeah,
in your
I've
life.
never read
Yeah.
that one, but I'm familiar with
Okay.
Steinbeck, of course.
There's a great line at the end where Mr. Lee says to one of the characters who feels inhuman because someone wants her to be so good and perfect. And she's saying, I can't be with him because he doesn't see me. He sees this image. And he says to her, and now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. And so there's been this healing in my life out of that perfectionism. Like, oh, God doesn't expect me to be perfect. There's a goodness that's available that's in that space. So yeah, there's a passion, there's a an obsession that it's healing. And that definitely became, there's another theme in the book of like, I think even becoming a pastor for me, it's definitely like has been a pursuit of healing the trauma and revisiting. I think there's been this drive of like, I have to prove you can do this with integrity because of seeing all the people who didn't and not on some level, it's pretty unmerciful, I guess. Wanting to prove like, no, you don't have an excuse. You can do it with integrity. That's getting softer. And I don't have that need quite as much. I think the book has helped that heal too. But, yeah, just wanting to do this and wanting people to be safe instead of harmed in it, and for mercy to triumph over judgment.
Awesome. Did you want to read an excerpt?
Yeah, sounds good. That's a hard thing to pick.
Like I have to choose 1 minute out of my entire book to read? Come on, no
Yeah,
author can do that.
it is it's in the hospice. So people have this has been a steady story that has come back as people's favorite in it. Sorry, I had it pulled up and it left. Here we go.
You're
Thank you. Silence almost always increases as death approaches. It is astounding how much of our communication is exposed as posturing when the somberness of the end is undeniable. In those moments, the holiness of hands holding hands and the splendor of a gentle washcloth's wipe across a brow are unveiled. Paths often diverge at this moment. Those who have made peace with loved ones acknowledge their grip on possessions is ending and accepted their place among the living and dying, that is humanity, lead others into this place of acceptance and peace. One hospice chaplain shared with me, acceptance doesn't mean I like this or want this, but it allows there to be other possibilities. Acceptance demands wonder. The chaplain continued, certainty and vulnerability cannot go together. If someone cannot find comfort, then freedom is far away. She also noted someone who can't lose is always in desolation. We are often trying to help someone get freedom from a prison they have locked themselves in. Fighting for something you can't have isn't freedom. Each hospice worker I spoke with told me Christians with certainty are the most difficult to accompany on their journey toward death. When people repeat platitudes, I know where I'm going, I know my Lord and Savior, I have no worries, it is likely their countenance doesn't match their words. They also noted how the certainty of the dying person robs the room of space to grieve or even be thankful in ordinary ways from the gathered loved ones. The lack of silence and repetition of certainty sucks the air out of the room and acts as a guard who has been assigned the task of keeping reality outside the door. One person shared this observation. Some people can't let go. They grip it so tightly. They have developed a taste for the plastic, the fake, the lie. One woman I sat with as she was dying was having a particularly difficult time letting go. She and I had a strong bond of avoiding pretentious platitudes. It didn't make either of us easy to be around, but we liked and enjoyed each other. For weeks, her family prepared her for this transition with stories of what heaven would be like. They told her she'd see loved ones in Jesus. They told her there would be no more pain and she would be in paradise. She looked suspicious and unenthusiastic. One thing we all knew about her was her dislike for right-wing politics and the death merge of Christianity in the United States government. We all wanted her to let go and fall into the peace and love of the God who loves her. I asked if I could go in alone and talk to her, and the family graciously allowed me the space. I knelt by her bed and held her hand as I told her that when she let go and fell asleep in love, she would wake up and Donald Trump wouldn't be president anymore. She left us about 90 minutes later. Make heaven great again.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any final comments before I let you go?
No, thanks for having me. It was a lot. That was a fire hose.
Yeah.
I apologize, but I appreciate the questions and you having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I know it's always hard as an author to condense the ideas of your book into just 30 minutes or less. But hopefully everybody got a good taste of what's in there and they'll pick up your book. You can find it on Amazon through Choir Publishing, correct?
Yes.
All right, everybody. We had DT Bryant.
Thanks a lot.